Welcome everyone for yet another exciting Fusion Talk series. I welcome all of you for the Fusion Talk on behalf of Prescience Insilico. Few words about Prescience Insilico. At Prescience Insilico, we team up with both industry and academia to tackle challenges in drug discovery and material science. The idea for this Fusion Talk series came from our wish to get experts from different fields to share their valuable insights. And we are very proud of we are one of the first Indian companies to create our own drug discovery platform software with advanced AI features. Prescience Insilico was founded by academicians who wanted to make AI-powered discoveries in drug and material that is accessible to everyone, aiming to redefine the landscape of scientific knowledge. And today we have Dr. Kshatresh Dutta Dubey as our speaker. And Dr. Kshatresh, he has done his Ph.D. from Department of Physics, Deen Dayal Upadhyay, Gorakhpur University of India, in the field of molecular biophysics. So by training, he is a physicist and a very good friend of mine. After his PhD, he has gone to he has done his postdoctoral research at IIT Kanpur, followed by postdoc again in Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Israel. Um, he was my colleague working as senior researcher at Uppsala University in the period between 2017 to 2018. He later moved to Barcelona, University of Barcelona, to do his postdoc. Followed by he came back to India as a Ramalingaswami Fellow at Shiv Nadar University, and since then he's working as a session professor, working in the field of enzyme engineering and enzyme designing. And the title of his talk today is just a minute. My system got hacked. The title of the talk is Repurposing Ancient Enzymes, Ancient Enzymatic Scaffold for Modern Purposes using In-Silico methods. And we are looking forward to this exciting talk. And now the stage is yours, Dr. Kshatresh. We would be love to hearing from you.
Thank you, Dr. Anil. Thanks for this detailed, I will say, introduction. So almost you explored all my academic journey. Okay, fine. So, okay, thanks for giving this opportunity so that I can discuss my recent works here. So today I'm going to talk about how to design enzymes, particularly those who are ancient scaffold. And we will use in-silico methods, particularly like in in-silico methods, what actually we do, we use all sort of computational things. We start from molecular docking, we do the MD simulations, and then we do the DFT calculation, QMM calculation. So my today's talk will be basically on the very fundamental level. I will discuss about what are the advantages of the enzymatic things, what are the main shortcomings of designing enzymatic things, and what are the protocols and strategies. So I will cover all these things, and I will give 2 or 3 examples that how we can design enzymes depending upon our need. Okay, so I will start with why enzymes. So there are several reasons why we can use enzymes for the bioengineering or designing, but the things I will just mention 3 points. One point is that they operate in natural conditions. So most of the you people see that actually people use different type of catalyst, and in that case they use to apply some very harsh condition. Just for example, take example of the ammonia manufacturing by Haber methods. You know that you are going to apply a lot of pressure, temperature, and catalyst, but the good thing with enzyme is that they completely operates on the natural conditions. You are either they are bacteria or the enzymes in our body. They are not going to use any harsh condition. They will operate in a very systematic way. And the second thing is that they are eco-friendly. So whenever you are going to use some different catalysts like platinum, palladium, so they have a lot of, I will say, the toxic products, and they are not, they will produce some type of radicals, and they are not eco-friendly. And dumping such type of, I will say that they are, I will say that other materials, which was byproduct of the catalyst, is actually a universal ecological problem. So those things are not with enzyme, they are completely eco-friendly. And nowadays, actually, people has found that we can do engineering there, like we can mutate them, we can do some type of bioengineering. And in 2019, Nobel Prize by the to the Francis Arnold. So it has been shown that actually by doing some type of directed evolution using very simple techniques, you can modify enzyme for our desired product. So these are 3 points which I am highlighting, that these are the very key fundamentals which we are using for the enzyme designing. Now, apart from that, there are some caveat in enzyme designing. One thing is that they are very specific. Like all those enzymes, they have evolved from some specific purposes. And that's why it is not like they are, we can use enzyme and we can ask them to catalyze any reactions. So nature, actually, they have evolved from very specific reactions. And other thing is that they have evolved for the natural reactions. Like we know that actually there are several metabolism processes in our body, in the bacteria, in fungus. So whatever they do, that is mainly the natural reactions. And nowadays, suppose that if we want them for the modern use, so might be we are asking them to do some different type of modern reactions, which are not the natural reactions. So that is another limitation for the enzymatic functions. Another problem with these enzymes that they are they have low stability, means that they are very much subcritical for the environment. Like they have very few organic tolerance. If you are going to do a lot of mutations, might be your enzyme will destroy, their protein structure will change. So you can think about that their stability, thermal stability, and the functional stability is very small. Another thing is that they have very limited substrate scope. So most of the time, it happens like they will just like adopt some very limited substrate. And suppose that if they are going to they catalyze fatty acids, most of the time, if even you are going to do the bioengineering, they will have a very limited substrate scope. They are not going to use some different type of substrate. Might be they will use the same family of the substrate. So that's why these 4 points are some type of caveats in the enzyme engineering. But actually, like yes. So I'm going to discuss about what are the key strategy in the enzyme designing. So the first thing is that it is just my suggestion, depending upon my many years experience of the enzyme engineering, that whenever you are going to use enzyme engineering, we must use some very stable scaffold. Now the question is that what are the stable scaffold? So we can do very simple literature search, and we can get that those scaffold, those correspond to the very ancient gene, just like there are one gene that is known as the last universal LUCA, last universal common ancestor. So in that gene correspond to the team barrel fold, and people has found that the stability of such type of team barrel fold is very high. And these fold were actually like something billions years old. So it's mean that from the billions years, these such type of folds are actually coming to our nature. It's mean that their thermal stability is very high. So we recommend that whenever you are going to use some type of scaffold for bioengineering, so we must think about some type of team barrel fold, cytochrome P450 scaffold, and such type of scaffold which are very much thermal stable. Another point is that the enzyme should be promiscuous, means that it must show some type of versatility in the substrate specificity. so that it can adopt different type of substrate. Because now we are going to engineer enzyme for our modern use. And in that case, might be our substrate is different from the natural substrate. In that case, enzyme should show some sort of the promiscuity, so that it is not very specific for its natural substrate, but little bit it can adopt some different substrate. Might be their reactivities may be low, but at least it can adopt in active sites. And the third point of this strategy is the use of enzymes with high structural flexibility. Keep in mind that here I'm not talking about the active site flexibility, because in enzymes work on the catalytic sites, and the enzyme must retain their catalytic site. But I'm talking about the structural flexibility means some type of loop, some type of substrate access channel, which can open, which can close, which can have some type of elastomeric effect, so that by doing some type of modification, you can adjust the cavity, you can adjust the substrate access channels, so that different substrate can also accommodated by the enzymatic sites. So if we have some type of enzymes which show some degree of the structural flexibility, that will be the good. And another thing is that if we are going to design enzyme for some functions, so we must know about its reaction mechanism. Because if we know the reaction mechanism, in that case, we can modify enzyme depending upon the needs. So before going to do some type of any enzyme engineering, I strongly recommend to make its reaction mechanism, might be using some type of DFT calculation, and you must have a thorough idea about its mechanism. And the last thing is that we must think about that enzymes work in a catalytic turnover. And believe me, this is the most complicated point of the enzyme engineering. The reason is that when actually we think about the protein drug inhibition, in that case, the binding of our drug is the good thing. Like if drug is binding, we believe that actually it is working. But in enzymes, the drug binding is not the only factor. Actually, they work in a catalytic turnover. So let us see that what are the factors which decides about the catalytic turnover. So these are the factors I'm going to discuss, which are crucial for the catalytic turnover. The first and very important point is the substrate entry and the product exit. Keep in mind that enzymes work in a catalytic site. It means that your reactant must come, reactant means substrate, must enter into the catalytic site, and it can be catalyzed by enzyme. And whenever it is doing some catalysis, it will form the product, and product must also leave the packet. So that if the product is not leaving the pocket, now it will block the next catalytic site. So that's why you must have a very good channel so that substrate can enter as well as product exist. If it is just like you have a vehicle, everyone knows that. And for a proper functioning of the vehicle, it is just not like engine. Suppose that if you are just going and blocking the silencer of your bike, definitely even your engine is working, you know that you cannot start your bike. So same thing also happens. There must be proper exit way for the product. And somehow, if even you are completely, your catalytic site is very good, it is optimum, but somehow you are blocking the entry and exit of the substrate, your catalytic turnover will decrease and enzyme become the inactive. So that is a very crucial point for the enzyme engineering. The second point is the binding of the substrate. Keep in mind that when actually people do some type of in-silico designing, most of the people think about only the binding site, whether substrate is binding or not. But keep in mind that this is also very crucial, that your substrate must not bind very tightly. The reason is that when your substrate is being catalyzed, now it is making the product, and product must leave the pocket. If your substrate is very stable, like binding is very stable, even after the product formation, it will not leave the pocket. And in that case, again, your catalytic turnover will decrease. And that's why while designing the enzyme, you must think that there must be a moderate binding affinity. Means that it must not be too small and it must not be too high. Even if it is very small binding site, in that case, your delta Z will be very small. And in that case, the driving force to for the substrate to enter into the catalytic site will be also small and your substrate will not bind. So that is a very crucial point, that while the designing of enzyme, you must have a very good compensation between a strong binding and the loose binding, so that after the product formation, substrate must also leave the packet. So that is another very crucial point for the catalytic turnover. The next thing is that it is not only the thermodynamics, but reaction kinetics also matters in the catalytic side. The reason is that delta Z, that is the thermodynamics, that is the driving force for the substrate to enter into the catalytic site. But actually the reaction happens because of the activation energy. It's mean that you must keep in mind to the delta Z as well as the activation energy. Suppose that you have a substrate which is very good binder, but at the same time, your reaction is in such a way that actually activation energy is very high. In that case, substrate is the binding, but reaction will not process and catalytic turnover will also decrease. So that's why making a good balance between the thermodynamics and activation energy, that is the reaction kinetics, is also very important for the catalytic turnover. And the next thing is that well-organized water channel. So many times what happens, the presence of the water molecules near the active sites, they actually stabilizes the transition state. They may help to move the protons from one point to another point. They may decrease the protonation state. They may change the pK value. And if there is a change of the pK value, the proton acceptance, the proton donor, all these property can changes. And that's why the organization of the water channel into the active site is also very crucial to maintain a very proper catalytic turnover. So these are some points. And the last point is the polarity of the active sites. So actually it is well known, like we know that actually in 2013, this person, Warcel, he got the Nobel Prize, and he mentioned that actually there is a concept of transition state stabilization. And if you have a very polar active site, so these polar groups can apply the electrostatic interaction on the active site, and these electrostatic interaction can stabilize the transition state. So we must think that the active site must be polar in the nature. It's mean that somehow during the enzyme designing, you are taking all these concepts, that substrate entry, binding of the substrate, thermodynamics, as well the reaction kinetics, water channel, polarity. Might be you can come to the stage where you can design a catalyst which has a very nice catalytic cycle. Okay, so now I can't see my, okay. So these are some type of protocols, a general protocols which we are using in our group. And so we actually do this enzyme designing in two steps. The firstly, we try to know the mechanism of the wild type enzyme. Suppose that I have enzymatic scaffold. Let us say that I have cytochrome P450, and this cytochrome P450 does a natural reactions. So it will have a natural reactant. I am saying, even naming that substrate as a native substrate, means that this enzyme is evolved for this native substrate. So our first goal is that we try to understand the mechanism of this enzyme for its native substrate. So what do? We take the native substrate like crystal structure, where we have already structure of the native substrate with enzyme. And then we do the simulations, like we do the several classical MD simulations. And then we analyze the properties. And these properties are not only the thermodynamics, but actually we do the kinetics. Means that we calculate the delta Z, we calculate the activation energy using the Arrhenius equation or even the Eyring equation. So we calculate the both terms, thermodynamics and kinetics. And since this is the natural substrate, it's mean that we have its experimental value. So whatever we have got the theoretical values, so we correlate with experiment, and based on these data, we propose a mechanism. So means we know that whatever the enzymatic scaffold we are using, how it is working, and what is the function. So our first goal is that using this computational techniques, we actually understand the mechanism of functioning of this enzyme. Now we are coming to the second step. And the second step is that now I want to design this natural enzyme for some non-native, non-natural things. Means I'm saying that a non-native substrate. Means that my goal is that to design this so-called, this hypothetical cytochrome P450 for some reaction which actually naturally it is not doing. So what now I will do, I will dock the non-native substrate in the wild type enzyme. And then I will perform the simulations. And then I will calculate its stability, mainly thermodynamics. Now I'm not going to see about its kinetics, because I will see that whether this enzyme is accommodating this non-native substrate or not. So I usually, I will calculate its thermodynamical property. And then I will suppose that I'm seeing that this enzyme is not binding. Now what I will do, I will perform some mutations that by this simulation, I will have idea that what type of interaction it is lacking and what type of interaction I can enhance so that it can bind properly. And then I will perform the mutation. Then again, I will dock the non-native substrate in the mutant. Again, I will perform the simulation. Again, I will check the stability. And this type of cycle will turn unless I'm going to get a very stable enzyme with non-native substrate. And once I achieve a very stable binding, then we do the activity or like reactivity by using the QMM calculation. So this is the protocol actually which we are using in our group to design enzyme for some non-native or new to nature reactions. Okay. So now I'm going to give one example. So this is one example actually where we have used similar type of strategy and we have designed one enzyme, and we published this paper with in chemical science last year. So this was a combination of the computational and experimental study. Initially, we predicted some mutations, and then we had a collaboration in TFR Bombay, and these people actually experimentally tested it. And they found that whatever actually we predicted using the Insilico methods, that actually worked. An enzyme which was actually dead for the one activity, after doing some type of Insilico bioengineering, it is showing some activity. So we say that it is actually a rational based enzyme design. We have some idea, we have some mechanism, and based on that mechanism, actually we design. So I'm going to discuss very briefly about this case. So let us think about what was the problem and what was our motivation and how we came to the solution. The problem was very common. That is we wanted to activate enzyme for some type of oxyfunctionalization. And the reason is that this CH bond activation energy is very high, something about 100 kilocalorie. And this is a very demanding reaction you can think about the modern uses. So our motivation is that these enzymes can be a green catalysis. The reason is that there are several bioengineering work by Arnold group, and they have used this cytochrome P450, and this P450 actually shows such type of CH activations. So means that these are some type of literatures which were already available. Now there is a question that if this P450 can do such type of activation, CH activation, why I wanted to bioengineer these things. The problem, again, there was a problem. The problem is that whatever the enzyme Arnold, Manfred Reeds, or other peoples, European and American peoples are using, they have very low thermal stability. Means that they are very good for the European and American environment because the temperature is sufficiently low there. but it is not going to work for the Asian and the Indian scenario because we have a high temperature. Most of the time, you know that actually in some part of the India, temperature very easily go to the 40 degrees Celsius. It's mean that if we are going to use the P450, this is not going to work in our Indian continents. In that case, this is not a very good scaffold for our purposes. And another problem is that this P450 has a very low tolerance to our organic solvent, and it uses expensive electron donor NADPH. So these were some limitations of this P450, and we wanted to come up with these limitations. So, but the thing is that there is another enzyme that is known as cytochrome P450 175A1. And this is known as the thermostable enzyme. And the good thing is with this enzyme is that it is very stable. Even at the 60 to 70 degrees Celsius, it is stable. It doesn't show any type of structure deformation. It's mean that if instead of P450BM3, we are going to use this enzyme as a scaffold, this is going to work for our Indian systems. So we actually try to modify this enzyme instead of this one. So what was the problem? The problem is that like P450 does very efficiently CH activation, unfortunately, this enzyme is not evolved for this activation. Means it does not do this CH activation. So now we try to modify this enzyme for the CH activation based on our mechanism-based designing. So what actually we did, so these were our protocol that actually we docked non-native substrate, and then we performed the MD simulations, and then we got some insight from the MD simulation, just for example, like interactions, what are the interactions we need to be modified. And then we did some type of mutations, and we say that whether it is stable, then we did the mutation. Again, we did the MD simulations, like we were doing this work in a loop to loop. So until unless we got a stable things. When we got computationally stable complex, then we did experimental mutations, which was done by in the TFR lab. And actually we did this mutant cloning and then experimental verification. And then we were very, I will say that in connection, like it was a hand-to-hand with experiment. So we were proposing their mutations, they were doing the experimental verification. And if they are showing that reactivity is increasing, but not too much, then again we were doing the mutation, means that such type of in-silico mutation experiment was going on. Okay. And here you can see that actually this enzyme has this substrate, I will say that channel. Okay. And this is the heme, that is the oxidant, and this was a type of alkane, which is binding to the site. So as I told, we started with the docking. So when we docked, so surprisingly, we found that our substrate is binding here. Means that even without doing any type of mutations, we found that actually substrate is very close to the active site. But the problem is that when we asked to our experimental collaborators that whether this is showing an activity, they found that this enzyme was not showing any activity. However, it was showing binding interdocking. Docking score was very good. So what actually we did, so we did sometime, I will show you simulations. So now you can see the simulation. When I perform the simulation, you can see that this substrate is leaving the pocket. Means that while it was showing the good binding site, but during the simulation, you can see that it is going outside the binding site. It's mean that docking was not correct, but simulation was correct. And now we can see that since during the simulation, it is leaving the pocket. And this is the reason why in the natural environment, I will say that it is not showing any type of the reactivity. Then we did some type of interactions, like interaction analysis, like insight from the MD simulation. And what actually we found that there are some few things. One thing is that there is a one residue that is the, I will say this tyrosine 68 and this glutamine 67. And you can see that they were actually applying some steric hindrance on the substrate. And because of this steric pull, actually this substrate was the living. Another thing is that during entire simulation, I didn't get any type of the, I will say that, water. And in that case, I found that actually there was some residue like lysine 80 and this valine 20. They were also not promoting the water access. And also I found that actually there is a one tryptophan and there is a isoleucine, and these, the backbone of this isoleucine and tryptophan, they are making a type of gating. And because of this gating, actually substrate was unable to come very easily inside the site, active site. So based on that, actually we identified three hotspots. One is the substrate access amino acids, and the water access amino acids, and the substrate binding amino acids. And then we mutated that. And based on that, actually we performed several mutations. One mutation targeting only to the substrate binding, and then we did the mutation targeting only to the substrate entry and opening, and then we targeted water channel, and then we combined all, and finally we came with this mutations. And then we also the final mutant, we calculated its activation energy, and we found that actually the activation energy is very small, something like 18.3 kilocalorie, which is quite in the enzymatic range. It's mean that whatever the mutant or the final variant we propose, theoretically it is showing some type of reactivity. Then we connected with our experimental person, and then we can see that our final mutant was showing a good catalytic turnover. And this was done with Professor Mazumdar of TFR, and we published this paper in Chemical Science. So here we can see that if you have idea of the mechanism, so this mechanism can lead to the designing of the enzyme. And this is just a case study that if you have any rational, if you have a mechanism, so firstly you can do the mechanism, and based on this mechanism, you can design one enzyme for your desired things. So this was a combination of theory plus experiment, and we found that actually our in-silico prediction was working. Okay. So now I'm going to the second thing. So this previous study was one example that shows that a rational based enzyme designing. But the problem is that this term rational is itself very ambiguous, means that it can have different meaning. So the rational for reactivity can be, there are a lot of reasons. Might be it will be substrate entry, might be it will be product exit, might be it will be the binding of the substrate, might be it will be the activity. So this is something like, if I'm going to say that what is the rational for reactivity, you may have a lot of options. So you cannot come with a single solution. So another question is that, can we have a quick descriptor of the reactivity? So that, like, suppose that now we are going to go for the machine learning, and in machine learning, we need to define some type of descriptor, and that descriptor actually defines some type of reactivity. So can we have a very generalized reactivity? Answer is yes, that is the activation energy. You can calculate the activation energy and you can correlate the reactivity. But the problem with the activation energy is that it demands QMMM calculation or even the DFT calculation, which is itself very high demanding. And suppose that if you are going to do the enzyme designing, in that case, you have to design several mutants. Suppose that you are going to design something 10 to 15 mutant. And think about that, if you have 10 to 15 mutant, so you are going to design QMMM calculation for 10 to 15, and it takes too much time. And that's why only the activation energy cannot be a very quick, it can be a descriptor, but it cannot be a quick descriptor. In that case, actually, we came with another idea that whatever the Warcel told, that actually it is the local electric field of the enzyme that stabilizes the transition state. So we came to the one idea that whether we can apply this local electric field as a quick descriptor for the reactivity. And now there are many softwares just like Titan and Tupa. They can calculate the local electric field within the minutes. In 1 or 2 minutes, you can calculate the local electric field. So that's why the calculation of the local electric field is very quick. So if this electric field can be descriptor of the activity, instead of doing this rigorous QMM calculation, you can utilize it as a descriptor. So let us see that one project where actually we have established. So this work was mainly done by my student Shakir, and who just completed his PhD, and now he is going with Adrian Mulholland in the University of Bristol. So we published this paper in PCCP, and I'm just very quickly summarizing that. So to establish that whether this electrostatic field can be descriptor, we took example of this porismate mutase. And this porismate mutase is a family of isomerases. Basically, it changes porismate to the prephenate. And this is a crucial step of biosynthesis of some amino acids like tyrosine, tryptophan, such type of things. And it is a natural enzyme. So now we can see that this is the active site of two-dimensional structure of the active site. And now you can see that this is the transition state or even the substrate of this enzyme. And it is surrounded by several charges and the polar group like glutamate, arginine, tyrosine, arginine, cysteine, and all are even a type of charge and the polar group. People found that whenever actually they are mutating this arginine 90, almost its reactivity is gone. And the good thing is that so people did some type of mutations and they found that actually activity is gone. Just you can see that when it is wild type, this is the experimental values and reactivity is high. Whenever you are going to mutate with alanine, so you can say that actually it is decreased by millions time, like 10 to the power 6. Again, you are going to mutate by glycine, again it is decreased. And again, when you put with lysine or even the cysteine, it is again restoring. So it's mean that whenever you are going to use the charge group here, activity is increasing. And the most surprising thing is that in its reaction mechanism, these amino acids do not involve themselves. Just like unlike others, like there are amino acids may work as acid and base. There are some Schiff mechanism where acid base based catalysis, but here actually this is not any case. These amino acids do not itself participate in any type of reactions. So people found that what is the reason behind that. So what actually we did, so we did several calculations, like we did calculation with porismate, and then we use a transition state. So we did two simulations, one with reactant and another with its transition state. And we found that during your reactant state, like whenever actually we are using the native substrate and the simulation, we found that it is showing high degree of the flexibility. Means that the reactant and enzymatic complex is not stable. But when we perform the simulation with transition state, in that case, we can say that actually the flexibility is very small. It's mean that the protein environment is in such a way that actually it is stabilizing the transition state. And due to the stabilization of transition state, the TS energy is decreasing and actually it is decreasing the activation energy. So we found that this enzyme can stabilize the transition state. Now the question is that how actually it is doing. In that case, what we did, so we did two type of calculation. When we calculated activation energy in the gas phase, means that we completely eliminated the enzyme and then we calculated the activation energy. And now we can see that the barrier is something like 32.9, means that 33 kilocalorie. But when we use the same substrate in enzymatic part, now we can see that the barrier is 15.1, means it is almost half. So something is done by the enzyme, which is actually decreasing the activation energy. So what is that? In that case, what we did, we calculated the local electric field of the enzyme. And now we can see that we have a very good, I will say, the program Titan. And in this, using the Titan, you can just give the protein data bank like PDB structure, and it will create library, might be to the number library or even the charm library. And based on this charm library, it can calculate the electric field. So using this Titan program, we calculated the electric field of the enzyme. using the solvent, and we found that the value of electric field is something like 0.53 volt per angstrom. Okay, so this is the electric field of that. To validate that, it is actually the local electric field of the enzyme which is stabilizing the transition state. Again, we did two calculations. Now we can see that this is the gas phase calculation. And now we are applying the external electric field, not enzymatic electric field. We actually applied external electric field of the different region. And now you can see that by the application of the electric field, now the barrier is decreasing. So it's mean that if there is no enzyme, it is just like external electric field if you are applying, and you can see that electric field barrier is coming. And if you remember in previous slide, the almost enzymatic electric field was 0.5. So whenever actually you are going, we applied electric field similar to the enzymatic value, the barrier is something like 19.40, somehow equal to the enzymatic field. So it's mean that we got one information that actually it is the electric field of the enzyme which actually working to stabilize the transition state. So it is a type of electrostatic catalysis. And when we reverse the direction, so we can say that actually electric field is activation energy is actually decreasing, means that it is inhibiting the reactions. So this is the graph and other things. Now the thing is that how to correlate it. So if you remember the previous slide, I mentioned that activity was highest in the wild type. And then when actually we are going to mutate with alanine and glycine, activity decreases. So now we calculated the electric field of all these mutant. Now we can see that when the electric field is 0.3, in previous things, reactivity was high. Now you can see that after mutation of the alanine to glycine, actually there is decrement in the electric field, and then there was a resultant decrement in the reactivity. It's mean that we have a very strong correlation with electric field versus the reactivity. So it's mean that instead of doing a lot of calculation, we can use electric field as a descriptor of the catalysis. And this electric field can be calculated very easily, so that actually we can use in the machine learning, artificial intelligence, and very quickly, because we are going to do the enzyme designing. And in enzyme designing, you have to do a lot of calculation, a lot of QMM calculation. So we are coming with a very, I will say, quick solution that instead of doing your QMM calculation, just calculate the electric field, and then you can see that whether it is in the favorable direction or unfavorable direction, and then you can do the reaction or even the desired mutations. Okay. So based on this one, actually we designed another supramolecular case. Okay. So I will skip this because of the time. I think that I am already 45 minutes. So I will skip this case study. I'm going to discuss about the another project, which is basically the enzyme designing. Okay. Okay. So now I'm going to discuss another project where actually we designed cytochrome P450 for the PET degradation, that is the polythene degradation. And keep in mind that this cytochrome P450 has never found to do such type of reaction in the natural things. There are two enzymes, that is the PATs, hydrolases, which can degrade the polythene. But the thing is that actually we wanted to check whether the P450 scaffold can be used. The reason is that P450 scaffold is known to be very stable, and it has been used as a scaffold for several workbench, like by the Manfred Reeds and the Francis Arnold. So whether we can utilize this scaffold for the polythene degradation or not, so we started working on P450 scaffold for this one. So this is one project which is, I will say that very soon, I think that it will come to the JAX. Very recently we submitted revision for that one, and might be in 1 or 2 weeks, it will be online. So what happens, you can see that this is a trimer of the PET. So we are using 1, 2, 3 units. And then based on that, actually we propose a reaction mechanism. And now we can see that actually this is a cytochrome P450. And now we wanted to cleave this one. So we propose this mechanism where actually it is doing the hydrogen atom transfer, and then it is making one intermediate. And we found that this is the process where actually it can, like after this rebound, it can do this gem hydroxy ester formation, and then it can go for the dealkylation. So we propose this mechanism by the cytochrome P450. The next step is that we have to know that what are the parameters which we can tweak in our enzyme so that it can do the deesterification. So for that, actually, we calculated the bond dissociation energy of this part because we wanted to break this part. And if we wanted to break the this polymer of this polythene, definitely we have to break this bond. So we calculated the bond dissociation energy. So we can see that the bond dissociation energy, when it is not hydroxylated, in that case, it was something like 93 point. And whenever actually it is OH, like after this H abstraction from the compound 1, like the cytochrome P450, now we can see that actually it is decreasing. It's mean that when it is doing hydroxylation, there are something that this bond dissociation energy is actually decreasing. And then we applied the electric field. And now we can see that if we are going to apply the electric field along this one, so we can see that the bond dissociation energy is actually decreasing. So now we have a very clear idea that we have to design P450 in such a way that it can apply electric field in this direction, which in turn can decrease the dissociation energy. So we started on that. So basically, we took 3 scaffolds. One is the P450 OLET and BS beta and GCOA. The rationale was very clear that actually these are the 3 enzymes which can adopt very long chain fatty acid. Means that actually they can contain inside their binding pocket some very long fatty acid, something like C20 to C25 long fatty acid they can accommodate. So since we wanted to degrade a polymer, so we must have I will say, some scaffold which can at least accommodate a very heavy chain of the polymer. And that's why we opted for these 3 enzymes. And then we calculated the pre-organized local electric field of these enzymes. And when we calculated, we found some interesting result. Now we can see that among these 3 scaffolds, like OLET, PS beta, and GCOA, you can see that these 2 have a similar electric field along the OC1, but this GCOA has a direction which is favorable for the dissociation. Means that you can see that this has a negative direction and these 2 have the positive direction. And because of this negative direction, this enzymes has a tendency to favor the deesterification. Means that now this electric field can break the C bond. So in that case, this GCOA become our first choice of our bioengineering. Like we took this scaffold for the bioengineering. And then we started bioengineering. So we have this protocol that we took this scaffold, we docked the polymer, and then we calculated electric field, then we performed the MD simulation, and then we found that whether it is stable or not. When it is not stable, we calculated for the another critical residue, we can provide the interaction, then we did the mutations, again docked, means we did the similar type of things. And when we found that now, after different mutations, our complex is stable, then we preferred for the kinetic study, like reaction path and the QMM calculation. So these were our protocols. So now let us take the things. So this is the GCOA. So we can see that they have a very wide open channel, like substrate open channel, which is shown by this one. And this had 2 loops. This is the, like, you can say that 2 phases of the enzyme, which can come and it can close and open. So what happens, we docked while our trimer of the polythene inside that one. And we found that even it is not docking, means that it is not binding. And the reason we found that there is this amino acids, this phenylalanine 395, which is exactly inside this channel. So it's mean that this uh, phenylalanine is creating some type of hindrance so that our trimer is like trimer of this PET is not entering. So what we did, we mutated that. So we mutated this phenylalanine to the alanine, and now we again docked it, and now we found that now this substrate which was not entering into the active site, now it is coming to the active site. But again, there was a problem that this was our cleavage point. And now we can see that though it is entering, but this cleavage point is far away from our this active oxidant. Means that this active oxidant can only active if this point is coming here. So our next target is that to mutate in a such a way that this can come here. So in that case, we identified several key residues, just like this tryptophan and other amino acids. And ultimately, we came with this mutant. And when we mutated that one, now we found that like we have mutated several type of things with several round of this simulations. And we found that with this case of the mutation, now we can see that this cleavage point is exactly on the top of our active oxidant, FeO. It's mean that now our FeO can activate this bond. But there was another problem that when we did the simulation, we found that there are water channels, but these water channels are not coming to the active site. If you remember my initial strategy, I mentioned that you must have a very good proper channel. So it's mean that although your substrate is coming close to the oxidant, but we were not getting the water. So we found that basically there is an isoleucine 292. And this isoleucine is a type of hydrophobic, and might be this isoleucine is creating some type of trouble for this water so that it is not coming here. So ultimately, we also mutated this isoleucine. And then we found that, and we mutated this one with serine, because serine has OH group, and this OH group can form some type of water channel. And in that case, and then we again perform the simulation, and we can see that now we have very properly arranged water channel at the active sites. Okay, so we came this as our final mutant. Fine. So now we came with reactivity, and now we can see that it is doing the HAT, and then it is doing the dealkylation. For the HAT, you can see that actually barrier is quite low, something enzymatic range. And then here you can see that this is the main part. Here you can see that for the dealkylation, the barrier is something like 10.2 to 7.2. If there is a water, the barrier is low, something like 7.2. If there is no water channel, the barrier is something like 10.2. And this is reason one also I told you that a proper arrangement of the water inside your active site is very important for the enzyme engineering, which is very clear here. When there is a water nearby the active site, barrier is 7.2. Without water is 7.2. Okay. Even water is also stabilizing the product, and it is making it thermodynamically driven the reactions. So we can see that whatever we propose, this variant is doing efficiently. The maximum barrier is something like 18 kilocalorie, which is quite feasible in the enzymatic things. Okay, so this is working. Now the question is that what happens to those two scaffolds like BS beta and OLT, where the electric field was in opposite direction. So again, you can see that we perform the QMM calculation. Now this is the key point. Now we see that when the electric field is opposite direction, now you can see that the barrier is something like 28.7 to 24 kilocalorie. Even your product is endothermic. And since it is endothermic, it means that it is not thermodynamically preferring the reaction. And this is the reason why these two scaffolds are not good. And we know that the reason is the opposite orientation of the electric field. The same we also did with P450 OLT. Again, see here, that in this case also barrier is 18.6 kilocalorie to 25.1. It's mean that again it is not preparing the reaction. So this is very clear that when the enzymatic scaffold is in such a way that your electric field is favoring the dissociation, it will favor. So the choice of scaffold is very crucial for any enzyme designing. So what actually I will say the suggestion based on this experience, that instead of doing several round of in-silico calculation, just take the PDB scaffold and calculate the electric field and see whether your electric field favoring the reaction or defavoring reactions. If your scaffold is not favoring the reaction, remove it, work on another scaffold and see whether it is in the same direction. If it in the same direction, might be it will make your life very easy to bioengineer. So these things actually we came and ultimately we found that we can modify P450 scaffold for this I will say polythene degradation. Okay. So from this calculation, we can see that electric field can be local or external, can enhance the reactivity and selectivity of the catalyst. And the future scope of such study is that it can be used to design a new catalyst by strategically substituting some polar groups which can produce electric field for the desired reaction. Means that that like you must have some rough idea about the reaction mechanism, and you must have idea that this electric field is going to enhance the reaction or inhibit the reaction. And based on that idea, you can actually modify your amino acids. Might be like you can, if you want to use some positive, you can use lysine, arginine. If you want some negative electric field, use aspartate and glutamate, because they are, so it's mean that nature have given you different options. You have the charged amino acid, positive charge amino acid, you have the negative charge amino acids. So by playing with this amino acid, you can strategically direct the electric field along the reaction axis, which can change the reactivity. So this is just a type of, I will say, knowledge, whatever we have done this one. So a similar type of perspective we very recently published in JAX-AU, that design local electric field that can be a promising tool for the enzyme engineering. Okay. So with that, actually, I'm ending my talk, and I will acknowledge DBT and my group members. So now I will say Salni, she is now also has been graduated and she is working with in MPI, Germany, with Frank Nise. Surjit is also doing postdoc with Sasan, and Shakir, he just graduated and now he is going to Bristol in UK with Mulholland. And this is Bandana, and this is Bandana, and Bandana is going to graduate on 2nd August. She is going Korea, and Ankita, she is now scientist in quantum gyms, and others one. So they are actually the people who do the work. I have only planned, but these are the basically people who I will say do all those things, and whatever the success of my group, it is because of them. And Sasan is my collaborator as well as my mentor. Okay. And I acknowledge Shiv Nadar Foundation for very good research support and DBT India. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful talk, Dr. Kshatresh. Now the stage is open for questions. I kindly request all of you to post your questions in the chat window. Yeah, there are already a few questions, and I'll be taking one of them. Yeah, so Dr. Ashish Sulfala, he says, how should we predict this two strong binding computationally?
Okay. So basically, we have two, I will say, the driving interaction for any type of bonding. One is the electrostatic interaction and might be hydrophobic. So depending upon, like, suppose that we have some active sites, it depends upon what type of substrate you are going to take. Suppose that in your substrate, we have some charge group. So definitely you can calculate the electrostatic interaction, and you can mutate your active site in such a way that it can enhance the electrostatic interaction. At the same time, since now many drugs, they can contain the aromatic rings. So might be it can, because of this pi-pi interaction, some type of hydrophobic interactions, it can also enhance the activity. So using some little bit chemical intuition that what type of group is going to interact with your substrate, you can enhance the binding affinity. And computationally, we have several tools, like we can calculate very easily the delta Z binding. So you can play with different mutations, different substitution, and you can see that whether binding affinity is increasing or decreasing.
Yeah, I had one question. I mean, a couple of them.
Yeah, sure.
So is the local electric field always correlate with reactivity? And if it doesn't, then like where it will be failing as per your knowledge?
So far, actually, we have seen that it is always like it goes with the reactivity. The reason is that actually, whenever actually like reaction is going from reactant to transition state, then product. So basically, what happens when there is a local electric field, it is stabilizing. Like whenever your reactant goes to transition state, because of your resharing of electrons cloud, it has a temporary dipole character. Like, you know that actually when there is your electrons are filled, it will be something like closed cell. But during the reactions, actually there is a deformation in the sharing of electrons, and it creates a local temporary dipole. And if your enzyme has some local electric field, because of this interaction of your local dipole of transition state with your enzyme, actually it stabilizes your transition state, which brings your activation energy down. So far we have seen, might be there are some, I will say, exception, but my experience says that it always goes with the activity.
Okay. And yeah, I have regarding your ET related enzyme reactivity. So since there are existing enzymes, let's say for example PETase or let's
Yes,
say QPase, so those do this ester hydrolysis reaction.
Yes.
Compared to a P450, it's going with a different enzyme mechanism. So as per your experience, which of this reaction, let's say ester hydrolysis or the reaction carried out by P450, which one is the a simpler, or I would say the faster reaction?
Yeah, that is a very good question. I will say so far we are doing the enzyme engineering, but yet we have not superseded the natural things. And natural system are still faster than that one. So since this hydrox like PET, or we can say that there's cutinase, they are natural part. So their efficiency is better than whatever I have proposed them. That's correct. Only thing is that problem is that, as I told you, that these PETs are they are not so much thermal stable. Okay. So suppose that if someone wants to enhance it like in much more scale, and if they are going to mutate it, there is a great chance that these enzymes are going to be denatured. And in that case, they will lose their. So, but the P450 scaffold is very stable. And so there are several, like people have found that they have done something like hundreds of mutations and still it is stable. So we propose that by doing some mutation, like we are a theoretician, we can predict something. So by doing this refinement, some type of mutations, we must have one alternative source other than the PET. So we are proposing that this mutant can be an alternative scaffold for the natural world, which later on can be even supersede whatever the natural enzymes are doing.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And yeah, last question. Yeah. So, is there any possibility of, let's say, doing high throughput scaling?
Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, is there any possibility of doing high throughput screening using your approach, or like have you already?
Yes, I think that correct. Yes, there are options now. Things are moving. Computational things are moving very fast. Now, even we can write a chat GPT and it can create a Python code which can create an automated system where you can create like these programs which I have used, like Titan and Tupa. They are on the open sources. Okay. So now the thing is that we can write one program which can automate that system, so that if we have library of this, library of this substrate and enzymes, so we can screen and we can do that. So definitely it is possible.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, once again, thank you for the wonderful talk
Wonderful.
and discussion we had. And now I will hand over this session to Val Kumar to give a vote of thanks. Hi, Val.
Hey,
Yeah.
Hi.
yeah, so yeah, it's a fantastic session we had today. Thanks, Dr. Dubey. So on behalf of the organizing committee, I'd like to extend our heartfelt thanks to all of you who joined us on this busy day for our monthly fusion talk. Of course, the intent here is where we are aiming to bridge the gap between academia and industry, bringing industry and academia experts like you into this session. So first and foremost, I'd like to express our sincere gratitude to our speaker here, Dr. Dubey. So Dr. Dubey, your insights, into the engineering of enzymes for industrial applications were, truly enlightening. The way you explain the role of enzymes as nature's catalyst and their significant application in industry, such as pharmaceuticals, fragrance, and food, was both fascinating and, of course, very informative. So thank you so much for doing that. Your extensive research experience and your journey, from being a postdoc fellow at prestigious institutions to your current role as a professor and, Ramalingaswami Fellow at Shiv Nadar University are incredibly inspiring for us. So thank you, being part of this session. In the same note, I will also like to thank our participants, without which, this session is not successful. So for all their active engagement and thoughtful questions. So definitely your participation and, presence, make this session very enriching. So thanks for all the questions. You know how valuable the time here is for everyone at the middle of a busy day. So thank you once again for everybody making this effort to join us in this virtual meeting. Yeah, let's give a virtual round of applause to our speaker and all of you who made this session a success. So we look forward to seeing you at the next Fusion Talk, as we do this every month, where we will continue to explore the intersections of academia and industry. So yeah, until then, stay curious, keep innovating. So thank you, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you both for giving this opportunity. Okay. See you.
Thank you. Bye.